Coronation Street tease that trouble is brewing between Todd Grimshaw and newcomer Theo Silverton, a relationship that begins with a quiet intensity and soon spirals into something far more complicated. From the outside, the early stages of their romance seem tender: careful glances, late-night conversations at the Rovers, and an unmistakable bond forming between two men who've both known their share of heartbreak. But beneath the surface, something darker stirs in Theo, something rooted in a past he's tried hard to bury. Theo's struggle with his sexuality isn't just a recent discovery. It's a wound that runs deep, one inflicted long before he ever arrived in Weatherfield. Raised in a conservative family, he had been subjected to conversion therapy at the age of 16, an experience that scarred him emotionally and psychologically. The therapy sessions, led by a man named Noah Calder, were harsh, manipulative, and driven by religious extremism. They taught Theo that love, his kind of love, was something to be corrected, not celebrated. Now in his 30s, Theo is trying to reclaim his identity. He's made strides in therapy, opened himself up to romance, and even hinted to Todd about moving in together. But the shadows of his past have not loosened their grip. Theo is guarded, sometimes rigid in his expectations, and prone to jealousy. Todd, ever the empathetic soul, senses the cracks in Theo's emotional armor, but he also can't help feeling increasingly suffocated. Their relationship begins to shift when Todd grows close to James Bailey. What starts as a casual friendship between Todd and James, bonded through community events and mutual acquaintances, sparks an unexpected reaction in Theo. He warns Todd to be careful around James, cloaking his jealousy in veiled concern. Todd, taken aback, doesn't press the issue but files the reaction away. Things come to a head one weekend when Dev Allahan throws a stag party, and Todd decides to bring George Shuttleworth as his +1. Theo, visibly perturbed, tells Todd he has a headache and insists they leave early. Todd, frustrated but still caring, agrees. However, the incident gnaws at him. Not long after, Theo suggests a romantic evening out, hoping to reignite their spark. But when Todd mentions he had already made plans to spend the night with Summer Spellman, watching movies and eating pizza, Theo's face drops. Summer, always warm and welcoming, invites Theo to join, but he coldly declines and announces he'll head to the pub instead. The tension escalates when a police officer named Jess approaches Theo outside the cabin. Calmly but firmly, she informs him there's been a report related to an older case, and that he needs to come to the station for questioning. Before Theo can protest, he's being guided into a squad car. Across the street, Billy Mayhew witnesses the scene and immediately rushes to find Todd. Breathless, Billy relays what he saw, and Todd's heart sinks. As they stand together outside the florist shop, a social worker, who had been scheduled to meet with Todd, arrives, only to hear about Theo's detainment. The woman looks concerned. "We'll need to reschedule," she says carefully. "But we'll also need to investigate whether this is another violent offense, like the last one." The words hit Todd like a freight train. "The last one," he echoes, stunned. It's the first time Todd hears of any violent history in Theo's past. He tries to reach out to the station, but there are no immediate answers. Back at his flat, he pores over every interaction they've had, every mood swing, every moment Theo turned cold or irrationally angry. Suddenly, things that once seemed like emotional vulnerability now feel ominously close to something darker. When Theo returns later that evening, his eyes are weary but defiant. "It was nothing," he says flatly. "A misunderstanding. Just someone stirring up old things again." But Todd isn't ready to accept that. "Did you hurt someone? Is that what this is about?" he asks, voice low, afraid of the answer. Theo hesitates, then sits on the armrest of the couch. "It was years ago. I was cornered after one of those therapy sessions, They called me things I won't repeat. I snapped. It was self-defense. But they made me out to be the monster. Todd listens, trying to reconcile this version of events with the man he's been falling for. There's part of him that wants to believe Theo, to see the broken boy underneath the pain and anger. But another part wonders how many pieces of the story are still missing. Worse yet, there's Noah. The re-emergence of Noah Calder into Theo's life threatens to undo whatever progress Theo has made. Now married to Danielle, Theo's estranged wife, Noah presents himself as a reformed man, but his intentions are far from pure. He's manipulative, still deeply entrenched in the belief that Theo can be fixed, and now he has leverage, Danielle and the children. Danielle, while distant from Theo, still has legal custody over their 2 children, and Noah has embedded himself in their lives. Theo's love for his kids remains his most vulnerable pressure point. Noah knows this, and he begins to weaponize it. Subtle at first, Noah starts appearing around Weatherfield. At Roy's Cafe, at the school gates, even outside the Rovers. He always offers a smile, a calm demeanor, but there's something behind his eyes, cold calculation. Then come the messages. Danielle texts Theo, warning him that if he continues his relationship with Todd, there may be consequences regarding access to the children. Theo spirals. He cancels a planned weekend with Todd, shows up unannounced at Danielle's house, and argues with Noah in full view of the neighbors. Billy, worried about the direction things are taking, tries to counsel Todd. You're not a therapist, Todd. You can love someone and still recognize when it's hurting you. But Todd is torn. He knows what Theo endured, and part of him believes he can be the person to finally give Theo the unconditional support he's always been denied. Yet Theo's behavior grows more erratic. When Todd laughs a little too long at something James says during a charity fundraiser, Theo doesn't speak to him for hours. He later accuses Todd of humiliating him in public. You think I didn't see the way he looked at you, he snaps. Todd, exhausted, begins to consider the unthinkable. Is he becoming complicit in his own unhappiness? As whispers swirl around the cobbles, and Theo's past continues to unravel, one thing becomes clear: this is no ordinary romance. It's a love story complicated by trauma, control, and secrets long buried. And with Noah lurking in the shadows, Todd and Theo's relationship stands on the precipice of either salvation or destruction. Theo's return from the police station marked a turning point. Though he tried to brush the incident off, a visible shift had occurred. The mask he wore around Todd, half vulnerability, half control, was beginning to crack. The pressure of holding together his fractured world, now pressed between his unresolved trauma and Noah's tightening grip, started to seep through. The day after the arrest, Todd walked through the precinct halls, asking quiet questions, hoping to get clarity without setting off alarms. He learned only fragments. The original accusation, filed years ago, involved a violent outburst during a confrontation with 2 members of the church where Theo's therapy had taken place. The victims dropped charges, citing spiritual forgiveness, but the incident had been logged. This time, however, someone had come forward to reopen it. Back at the flat, Todd confronted Theo again. Is there more? He asked, calm but firm. Theo hesitated, then admitted it was Noah who had gone to the police. He's trying to provoke me, Theo said through clenched teeth. He wants to show Danielle I'm unstable. That way, he can keep the kids away. He doesn't care about justice. This is about power. Todd didn't doubt the manipulations of Noah. Every interaction, they'd had so far painted him as cold and controlling. But the line between Theo being a victim and Theo being a man with dangerous edges was beginning to blur. In an effort to help, Todd suggested therapy again, a proper one this time, not the pseudo-religious sessions from Theo's youth. But Theo bristled at the idea. You think I'm broken? Just like they did. No, Todd said gently, I think you're hurting. And I want to help. But I can't do it alone. Meanwhile, Danielle found herself caught in a web of contradictions. Her marriage to Noah was not a happy one, and though she no longer loved Theo, she didn't want to be the villain in his story. Still, Noah's charisma and quiet pressure made her doubt herself, and she found it easier to defer to him. She began limiting Theo's access to the children, insisting visits be supervised and less frequent. Todd, now shouldering the emotional fallout, grew more isolated. He pulled back from his friends, missed drinks with Sean, cancelled dinners with Billy. Summer noticed too. He's changing you, she said one night. You're always second-guessing yourself now. What neither of them knew was that Noah had started contacting Summer behind Todd's back. Posing as a concerned friend of Danielle's, he warned her subtly about Theo's instability, planting seeds of doubt in her mind. At first, she dismissed it, but then she saw bruises on Todd's wrist one afternoon and couldn't ignore the possibility that something darker was taking root. The truth was more complex. Theo hadn't hurt Todd physically, but his grip, once affectionate, had tightened in anger during a fight about Noah. Todd hadn't told anyone. Partly out of shame. Partly because he believed it was a one-off. A week later, things escalated. Todd had arranged for a family picnic with Summer and George, planning to introduce Theo in a more relaxed setting. Theo arrived late, already agitated, muttering that Noah had been seen with Danielle near the school. When Todd tried to calm him, Theo exploded. You act like I'm paranoid, but you don't know what he's capable of, he shouted, startling George. Summer stepped in, voice calm but stern. This isn't the time or place. Theo stormed off. That night, Todd found him sitting on the floor of their flat, surrounded by old photos and notes from his therapy days. Pages filled with quotes like "Purity is freedom, and sin is a choice." Theo looked up with tear-streaked cheeks. I don't want to be like this anymore. Todd sat beside him. Then let's get help. Real help. Together. For a while, it seemed like they'd turned a corner. Theo agreed to attend a counseling session with a specialist Todd had found. The therapist, Dr. Lydia Cattry, was kind but incisive, immediately identifying the controlling behaviors and unprocessed trauma in Theo's emotional patterns. After 3 sessions, progress seemed slow but real. But then, Danielle served Theo with a formal injunction, Noah's doing, likely, with an affidavit that alleged Theo's instability, supported by manipulated texts, and a carefully edited voice recording from one of his rants. Suddenly, Theo's access to the children was legally blocked. That night, Theo didn't cry. He just shut down. Todd tried to reach him, to draw him out, but Theo went silent. Then came the turning point. Todd found texts on Theo's phone. Dozens of them. From Noah. Some threatening, some patronizing, some almost affectionate. And Theo had responded to several. Sometimes engaging, sometimes pleading. When Todd confronted him, Theo defended himself. I thought if I played along, he'd back off. You lied to me. I was trying to protect what I have left. Todd, now emotionally raw, packed a bag. I love you, but I can't help you if you won't be honest with me. Theo lashed out verbally, calling Todd a coward, saying he'd walk away, just like everyone else had. But Todd didn't turn back. He stayed with Billy that night. Over the next week, Theo disappeared. He didn't return calls, didn't go to his therapist, and was seen once by Summer sitting alone in a pub, staring at a photo of his kids. She tried to speak to him, but he barely registered her. Then came the final shock. Noah was assaulted outside the medical center. His injuries weren't life-threatening, but the whispers began immediately. Theo was seen leaving the area minutes before the attack. Police arrived at Todd's flat the next day with questions. Todd, stunned, told them he hadn't seen Theo. Billy, alarmed, asked if Todd believed Theo was capable of violence. "I used to think no," Todd admitted. "Now I'm not sure." Danielle called Todd that night. Her voice was tight with fear. "He came to the house. He didn't try to hurt me. But the way he looked at me, like I was the enemy." The next day, Theo turned himself in. He denied the assault, but admitted he needed help. "I lost control," he said simply. "But I didn't touch him. Not this time." He was held under a mental health evaluation order. As the dust settled, Todd visited him once. Theo looked older, quieter, somehow smaller. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know," Todd replied. "I just hope you mean it for yourself, not just for me." Back in Weatherfield, Danielle finally admitted to the solicitor that Noah had been manipulating the situation. A quiet investigation began, and for the first time, the narrative around Theo began to shift. He wasn't absolved. But at least the truth was more complicated than the lies Noah had constructed. Months later, Todd walked by the flat he and Theo once shared. It was empty now, quiet. He thought about the man he loved, the boy still trapped in the man's heart, and the healing that would take years. He didn't regret loving Theo. But he knew that some loves aren't meant to last. They are meant to change you. 6 months passed. Theo remained in a secure recovery facility outside Manchester, focusing on therapy and mental health treatment. Despite occasional headlines in the local press, Weatherfield resident accused in assault scandal seeks treatment, the public interest faded quickly. But for Todd Grimshaw, the memories didn't. One afternoon, as autumn leaves dusted Victoria Street, Todd received an envelope in the post. Inside was a brief letter in Theo's handwriting, steady but stripped of flourish. "I don't expect forgiveness. But I do want you to know that I've started to understand. Not just what I did, but why I did it. That's a start, I think. Thank you for trying when I couldn't." Todd folded the letter neatly and placed it in his drawer. Around the same time, Danielle sought legal advice to dissolve her marriage to Noah. After months of coercion and emotional manipulation, she finally told her solicitor the full truth about how Noah had threatened to use the children as a weapon against Theo, and even her. The court issued a protective order. Danielle retained full custody, and Noah was forced to leave the home. A few quiet weeks later, Danielle approached Billy at the church. "Can you pass something on to Todd?" she asked, handing him a small framed drawing. It was a crayon sketch from one of the kids, Theo with both children under a rainbow, smiling. "They don't understand everything," Danielle said. "But they still love their dad. And they miss him." Billy gave it to Todd without a word. Todd stared at it for a long time. It was George Shuttleworth who eventually asked the question that had been dancing around the pub whispers and quiet cafes: "Would you ever see him again?" Todd thought about it. If he came back. Maybe. But not to start again. Just to say goodbye properly. But fate had other plans. In early spring, word spread that Theo had applied for supervised visitation. Danielle, surprisingly, didn't object. "I think he's different," she told Todd over coffee. "I'm not saying we'll ever be a family again, but the kids should know where they came from. And who he is now. Not just who he was." Todd watched from a distance the first time Theo saw his children again. It was in a community garden under council supervision. He didn't approach. He didn't need to. The quiet smile on Theo's face, fragile and hopeful, was enough. And then came the quietest moment of all. A Sunday evening, just after Vespers, Theo appeared at the door of Billy's church. He looked healthier. Sober. Older somehow, but not in a tragic way, in a grounded one. Billy opened the door, but didn't speak. "I don't want to cause problems," Theo said. "I just wanted to leave something for Todd." It was a small notebook. Inside were handwritten pages, each an entry from Theo's time in treatment. Reflections, regrets, hopes. A record of his trying. Billy gave it to Todd the next day. He didn't read it all at once. Some entries were hard. Honest. Brutal. One described the moment Theo realized he had mirrored the control that once imprisoned him. Another recounted a memory from conversion therapy, where a counselor made him sit in freezing water and repeat that he was unclean. That pain had shaped everything. But toward the end, a softer tone emerged. "Maybe I wasn't born broken. Maybe I was broken by people too afraid to understand me. And maybe Todd was the first person who saw that and didn't flinch." That night, Todd didn't cry. He just sat on the edge of his bed, holding the notebook, and felt the weight of what it meant to witness someone's healing, even from afar. The last line in the final entry read, "I'm learning how to love people without needing to own them." Maybe that's what real love is. It wasn't a reunion. It wasn't a romantic reconciliation. But it was closure. And in Weatherfield, closure was rarer than sunshine in November. Over time, Theo visited the children more regularly. Danielle remained protective, but cautiously supportive. Theo rebuilt bridges slowly, never demanding forgiveness, only hoping to earn trust. Todd, for his part, returned to himself. He rebuilt friendships, laughed more with Summer, and even began dating again. Nothing serious. But open. Every now and then, their paths crossed. A nod. A glance. A quiet acknowledgement of all they had been through. No bitterness. Just a complicated kind of peace. Coronation Street didn't forget the storm that had passed. But it moved forward. Just like they did.